Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a first submission for the horse Manolito by Lisette. Now, Lisette is the same person we've been seeing on the horse Timo, who's done a wonderful job with that. And I'm including a little clip here of her showing the horse some years back that she sent me to see where she had sort of gotten off direction and what had begun to happen with the horse. This horse is 22 years old. It was a driving horse, and then she tried to ride it in dressage, and it started having all kinds of soundness problems, tendon problems, back problems, arthritis, almost kissing spine, various things like that. So I thought I would include this little clip as well, just so we can all kind of see where he came from. And what a nice horse. I mean, to be 22 years old and be bringing him around the way you are is doing a very good job. But what we see here in the beginning of your problem, and of course she knows this, so I'm just repeating information that she had already come to this conclusion herself. So you can see how tight the horse is there, how he's broken in the third vertebrae in the neck, he's overflexed all the time. His back is definitely dropped and hollow in all three gaits here. But once again, he's a nice big horse, so some people would be fooled by this. And there the canter looks fairly slow and kind of controlled and doesn't look too out of balance. But once again, because the horse isn't up through his back, it's really not uphill, and the horse is just kind of cantering downhill into the ground, so to speak, as he goes along. And if you were to open a canter like that up, you'd find the horse quite out of balance. So you can see how stiff this horse is in the neck here and how it's not moving through at all. It's not being able to use its back at all. It's being held so tightly in. And of course, that's what leads to all these problems that we see so many people having. And you can see there she tries to make a canter transition. Of course, you know, she's having to hold the horse very tight in her hands in order to try to make it appear that his head is down. But of course, he's really just being held in the frame. And once again, she knows this and has come to this conclusion herself and found us without me having to tell her, so to speak. So I'm including this here just so others can see. You know, when you go to horse shows and you see horses like this that are so hollow, and yet people are still giving them, you know, 65% and 70%, and we even see some of the big top, you know, riders getting 80% on these completely hollow horses. So I just point that out because this is something that we all have to start discussing and get an open dialogue going so that these organizations like the USDF and the FEI can begin to rein in this disastrous sort of methods that's become allowable in dressage. We can see here clear in the walk how this horse is breaking in the third vertebrae. See how completely collapsed the back is, and once again look below her heel there and you see how the horse's belly is completely dropped, almost like a pregnant mare. So we can definitely see the horse is not working over its back. And remember, in dressage, that should be your first indication. I mean, no horse that's hollow should be able to score higher than a 4 on any movement. But because the USDF and the FEI judges have allowed this to go on for so many years, we've actually educated a whole, you know, group of people in the wrong way. So you can see this horse almost looks lame as he tries to go down. That's what we call a bridle lameness. He's so broken in the neck and so tight over his back that, you know, while he does look a little better stretching there, he looks very uneven and irregular. Now, once again, you'd say with a rider like this, I mean, she actually has quite a nice position and all that, but remember that it's how the horse is going. You know, people tell me all the time, oh, she's such a beautiful rider, and then I look at the horse and it's completely upside down. So a lot of people are learning these days to pose on horses, often by holding against their mouths in order to hold themselves in the straight up and down position that they think they need to do, which of course just creates more and more problems. And it's why we see so many things. See how this horse is trying to get into the canter, how he just scoots off completely hollow, and we see how the back just completely dropped on that last transition. And everything she tries to do here is just very, very difficult. So you can see how uncomfortable this horse is. So it'll be very refreshing when we go and see the next tape of the horse, how she's working him now. So she actually stopped on this horse and gave him about a year off and is just getting back to work with him again. And but once again, it doesn't matter how old they are. If they're still sound, as this horse is, as you see with our horse Contigo, he's 22 years old too, and now he looks like a 4-year-old. If you've seen him at 16, he looked like he was, you know, ready for the killer truck, so to speak. And now he looks like he's completely regained his youth, and this horse can do the same thing as well. Fortunately, unless, you know, you've really done permanent damage, most of these kinds of things are reversible if we get to them before we've done any real permanent damage to the horse. But as this one, as you said, was well on its way with the beginning of kissing spine and arthritis in his neck, arthritis in his back, all these things that caused the horse to become difficult to ride. And once again, that's the thing we should always put in our minds. Like, why is a horse difficult to ride? You know, most horses, if they're actually trained correctly, are pretty easy to ride. So now we're going to take a look at the same horse, and we can see how completely dropped and how underside of the neck is developed there. That's the wrong part that we want to see developed. So we can see that a horse, when you see a horse like this with its neck so underdeveloped like that, or developed the underside of the neck, so to speak, that shows us that the horse has basically been pulling with its shoulders its whole life, instead of engaging and lifting with its back. And once again, as we pan out here, we can see how this horse's belly is dropped. It has no core strength at all. And it's basically collapsed in the middle. So a horse going like this is like two men in a horse suit. You know, there's not very much communication between the two ends because the back can't can join in such a way that the horse can be connected and ultimately come through the back. And it's such a wonderful feeling when you start really riding horses through and realize what that feels like when you feel this energy come through the body of the horse. But that can only happen if it's coming through a back that's lifted. It simply cannot happen if the horse is hollow. And of course, that hollowness leads to all the problems that this horse had. But we can see it's this great starting point to see this horse, because I'd love to see you do this again in another 6 months, and we can see how much the horse will change. But once again, you can see how completely dropped that horse. This horse's withers have never even developed correctly. So once again, it's that first couple of years that pull the shoulders up and pull the withers up through the shoulders rather. And that you can see how dipped the whole loin is there. I mean, this horse was just, you know, if you had not begun to work him in the way you're now working him, you would have had very little life left in the horse. But doing what you're doing now, I feel quite strongly that you'll get all the way there. And he should come all the way back. And what a nice horse it will be when you do. So starting off here once again, now this is the same horse. I mean, look how much happier this horse is just in the walk. At least the horse can walk with some regularity. So whenever you see people like that first video that we saw of this horse, and it's just a struggle, it's a struggle. The horse is struggling for every transition because the horse is not in a position to be able to do those transitions. So of course it's a struggle. So once we realize that, you know, the horses really, there are very few horses that really have bad characters, or at least that weren't made to be bad characters by mistreatment of humans, but very few of them come with bad characters that I've ever found. Usually when we solve the problems of how they're moving and how they're working through their backs, most of the other problems just disappear all by themselves, and we don't need a lot of special attention to much else other than getting the horse over its back, and we find that everything else disappears. It's like trying to bend a horse. Once again, remember, there's no point even thinking about lateral bend of the horse until the horse can get over its back and lift its back. That's what allows the horse to bend. But this is really good work you're doing here, starting off in the stretch. This is really just exactly where we want to see the horse. And, you know, the good news is, you know, folks, that we can walk a lot, you know, with a horse like this. You can walk for a really long period of time. You know, not 10 hours or something, but you know what I'm saying. You can do a lot more of the walk than you can do of the trot. It's a low impact. But if we get the horse working over its back like this, the exact same thing will happen. So remember, you know, if we raise horses correctly, that is out on grass in big pastures where they have grass all over the pasture. Remember, a pasture means grass everywhere. Not a dirt lot is a lot that's got a feed bin in one side of it where the horses just stand there all day long because there's no grass in it. That's what we experience here in California all the time. So remember, that's how horses develop. Once again, that's why Kentucky is so famous for raising horses, because you can graze there all year round almost. There's very little snow in Kentucky, and especially in Lexington and that part. So people are able to graze their horses almost year round there on grass. You know, it's pretty temperate. So that's what makes it so good. And once again, just from walking and grazing with their heads down as babies, they will develop a lot of this position all by themselves. But unfortunately today, so many horses are raised in small pens. They're not raised on big enough farms, at least especially in places like California. Very few people can afford big enough areas, you know. And when I'm talking about big areas, you know, I grew up in Kentucky where horses were out on hundreds of acres of grass. You know, and I would think that you would need a minimum of a 20-acre field to me to raise horses in, if not something larger than that. But getting back to this once again, now look how fluid and happy the horse is. And once you begin to realize just how easy that is to get, once we get this part, if you get this down, everything else just falls into place, and it simplifies the training of the horse. Anybody who can get as far as Lisette has gotten here with this can train a horse to the highest levels, because once again, the first thing to understand is that you must develop the muscle and then use it and stretch it and let it relax again. So, you know, you don't develop the right muscles by pulling a horse's head down. What you do is develop the underside of the neck, as we saw with this one who was standing up before. But how already we've seen such a big change in this horse just from what we saw in that video, and even standing there, you can see how much better this horse looks going like this. And as you said, you know, this horse gets a little fractious on the lunge line. Well, you don't need to lunge them as far as I'm concerned. If you can get on the horse and walk it like this and get it walking over its back, that's all you need to do. That's my cardinal rule when I work with a young horse, is I stop lunging them every day at the point at which I can get on them and walk away like this without it being a struggle. With that being a big problem, you know, you just got to remember that, you know, there's a big difference between being able to stay on a horse and being able to correctly train one. So often people mistake the ability. They see people whipping up horses and the horses are bucking and they've got their shoulders back and they're staying on, and they think that's very impressive. But to me, an impressive rider is one who never has to fight with their horse. That's a much more impressive way to ride. I'm completely unimpressed by somebody just because they can stay on the back of a horse. That doesn't mean anything at all. It doesn't mean anything that they know anything about how to train one or how to develop one or even how one is supposed to go correctly. They just become good at staying on. Like a cowboy, you know, that coming out of the chute, you see how they keep their shoulders back and they come out of the chute. They learn how to do that very well. That doesn't mean they'd be able to do this. So once again, this is all really good walk work. Now, she had a question before, which was, should she just stick to the walk and not do the trot work? And my answer to you is, as long as the horse can stay over its back, you're doing fine. And so let that guide you. So if you can canter the horse and keep it over its back, then it's all good. You can work the canter. And some horses that have been jumping horses are bred for jumping or just have never spent much time trotting. If you can get them over the back in the canter, that's fine. They'll develop beautifully. So once again, that's our cardinal rule. We just don't want to do anything for very long with the horse hollow. So if you try the canter and you can't within, you know, a couple of circles get the horse stretching into the contact, then you need to come back to the trot. So you just don't spend a lot of time, because you've got to remember, the faster you go, the harder it is on your horse's legs and this sort of thing, that the horse is disconnected. So we want to do as little disconnected work as possible. You know, I see a lot of trainers who will ride their horses upside down and work with students, and they keep them, they beat them up and do all these things. And then at the very end, they'll say, oh, give them a stretch. Well, they should have been stretching at the beginning, not at the end. Just like a person working out, you go to the gym and you warm your muscles up. Well, the horse has to do the same thing. And when you keep a muscle tight, there's no blood flow through the muscle. So you've got to let them back in the stretch. So once you understand that we develop the muscle, and once we develop it, then we can bring the horse into a higher frame and use that muscle for as long as we can before it gets tired, and then we have to let the horse back out again. Holding a horse in a frame and making it work in that frame tight over its back, even for the people who do like roller, yes, they get their horses working kind of over their back, but in a very tense way. And if the horse is tense, it's going to do just as much damage as if it's hollow. So just remember that. It serves no purpose to have a horse over its back and have it be tense, because it will lead to the exact same things, which are a lame horse. But all this work that we're seeing here is really, really good. Now, just a couple of things with you. I'd like to see you just stretch up a little bit so your shoulders don't go down so much, and get your head up on top of your shoulders. Now, I don't know if it's just this saddle, and it can be, as I said, you said this horse is difficult saddle fit. So you look a little chair seat in this one. It seems to put your leg out in front of you a little bit, but that may very well be the way that it sits on the horse, and you know, maybe not a lot you can do about that. But one thing you might want to do is they do make shim pads, and I'm just looking at you go buying this saddle. I would probably suggest that you get a shim pad and put the shims in the back of the saddle so it lifts up the back a little bit. And I think then you wouldn't be, see, if you kind of see you in silhouette there, you're kind of sitting a little too far back on the cantle of the horse, and I think that's, the cantle of the saddle rather, and I think that's being caused by just the way it probably fits this horse. So a little bit of a lifter pad would do wonders for this. And I said, we work with these ones that we get that you can put shims in. You can put shims in the back or in the front or all the way along. So those work really, really well, especially if you're a pro riding a lot of different saddles. Then you can have one saddle, you know, you want to fit the saddle to your largest horse, and then you can use the shim pads, you know, for the ones that are smaller, adjusting the shim pads where they need to be. So that's a good strategy for people who can't afford a saddle for every horse they have. But always remember that saddle fit is very, very important. It's one of the first things we look at when somebody starts telling me, oh, my horse suddenly doesn't want to go forward, doesn't respond to my leg, isn't doing anything correctly, and is acting very fractious. Well, very often that is the saddle. So always check your saddle fit and be sure that that's not a problem if you have a good saddle fitter. But like everything else in the horse world today, there are thousands of people who say they train horses. There are thousands of people who are veterinarians. There are thousands of people who are saddle fitters, or hundreds anyway. And unfortunately, not all of them have the same level of skills. Let's put it that way. And that ranges from people who really know what they're doing and get everything right to those who really don't have a clue. So that you just have to be careful of. That's why we try to educate people. Once again, if you have any questions about saddle fit, watch that saddle fit video by my wife, who is a wonderful saddle fitter, one of the best I've ever seen. I'm very fortunate because my saddles always fit now. And that's why we got into it, because of our frustration with trying to find someone to work on our saddles, or finding a company that actually had representatives who weren't just saddle sellers, who actually knew what they were doing. But once again, getting back to this, you can kind of see how that puts your leg out in front of you there. So as I said, with that saddle, I think a lifter pad behind a shim pad would be the right way to go. If you don't know what one to order, I suggest you send my wife an email and she can suggest to you where to buy them. Since you're in Europe, I'm sure you can get them there someplace. But that's my suggestion to you. Anyway, all this walk work, getting back to this is all very, very good. I haven't seen anything I haven't liked. And once again, you can do lots of this. And once again, this is how you should hack out. Like when I was a kid, my father taught me whenever we hack out horses, we were always to have them on the buckle on the way to the rein and stretched all the way down. That's the way we always rode our horses. And I used to rehab fox hunting horses. That's what we did, for 2 months getting ready to hunt season. We went out and walked them like this, stretched down, and then we started doing a little trot, and then only a little canter in the last, couple of weeks going into the hunt season. So we brought the horses back into condition without injuring them again, which is what we want to do, especially if you're doing things as strenuous as fox hunting or even just dressage. The horse is supposed to hold the weight of a rider up. It takes a lot of work for the horse and a lot of physical development of the back in order for them to be able to do that, in order for us to carry us. And unfortunately, just like you would experience with this horse, this is a big, beautiful horse who's well moving. So you probably got along, as you did for quite some time. And people probably thought the horse looked pretty good. And then all of a sudden you start getting back problems. And as you said with this horse, he started bucking with you, and then you started getting tendon problems, all these kind of things. So, that we've got to look at the long term. And the more you do this and the more, you're around barns and realize how so many people who ride today who spend so much money spend more time with veterinarians than they actually spend riding their horses because of the way the trainers are riding their horses. They're always unsound. And if you have a trainer whose every answer is, oh, we better call the vet, it's time to look for another horse trainer, because you shouldn't be having that many problems with a horse if it's working correctly and within the scope of what the horse can do. As you see with this one, you're keeping this exactly what this horse can do. But look what a big, beautiful, active step the horse has behind. That's absolutely fantastic. So even though you're not getting out of a walk, this horse will develop beautifully just doing this, and you can do lots of this. Like how your hands are just going wide there when you need to. It's perfectly correct for schooling. Once again, so many people will watch this and go, oh, your hands are too wide. That's not how you're supposed to ride. Well, once again, you've got to remember, there's how you ride when everything is going well and the horse is up underneath you. That allows you to sit in that perfectly straight position and do all the things that we want to do comfortably and in the right position without having to move around a lot. But when we're just getting these horses just started, there's a lot of different things that we can do, like widen our hands the way you're doing there, just to teach the horse to accept correct contact. And in time, as this horse is already doing, it won't take you any time at all, because once again, the beauty of the classical system is that we're teaching the horse a better way to do what it's doing, so it doesn't resist. And if you look at how resistive this horse looked in this little dressage show that we saw before, and look at it now, what a different even look in its eye it has. When horses are upside down and hollow and people are trying to make them do things, you can imagine for the horse, it's just totally confusing. Imagine if somebody, wanted you to go in, let's say, a race, but they wanted you to tie one leg to your hand or something, totally, or something like that, or strap your arms to your side so you couldn't even use your arms to swing back and forth, which is part of how we naturally go as bipeds. So try some of those things to yourself and see how it affects your gaits. Well, imagine what we do to horses with tie downs and all of the restraining things. Everyone's always looking for a way to restrain the horse instead of realizing if you train them correctly, they won't want to run away with you. That's why we see so many people with horses. Oh, I can't stop my horse, can't stop my horse. Well, he's running away from the pain. That can be the pain of just being hollow, as you learned with this horse. His back started collapsing. Once they start collapsing to a certain point, they'll start to develop arthritis, and then they start getting back pain and all these kinds of things. Horses' backs are very weak. That's the number one thing to realize when you're going to go about training a horse, is that that's what it's all about. Yes, the horse is a big, powerful creature, but its back is very weak, just like ours. And the closer you get to the loin, the weaker it is. Same is true of the horse, just like us, when you get beyond where the rib cage is. So we must take all this into consideration. But look what a beautiful walk this has been. I mean, he's hardly broken stride, kept the same rhythm throughout. You're doing a wonderful job with this. But once again, I don't see you having to aid very much. Your legs aren't moving much. And once again, that's the whole thing. If your horse has gone dead, people write to me all the time, oh, my horse is so insensitive. Well, it's probably insensitive because you've been conflicting the aid so long that the horse just tunes out. When you stop pulling and pushing at the same time, most horses will get much lighter to the aid. As we say, the thickest skinned horse in the world will react the moment a fly lights on it. So they can certainly feel your leg on the side of the horse, you know. Really good here. And once again, you can see in silhouette how that saddle just puts you a little bit in a chair seat there. Would like to see you just stretch your chest up a little bit and just get your shoulders back up on top of your head back up on top of your shoulders, that is, and your shoulders lifted and back a little bit, flattening them into the back. But once again, that's secondary to how the horse is performing. You know, once again, I'd much rather see the horse going well and have you doing whatever you have to do to get that to happen. Because what will happen in time is that your position will improve. Now, this is a good canter. We didn't see trot work there, but this canter is good enough. Once again, this horse is cantering over its back, so that's a good enough canter that you can canter. And as you said, the trot is more difficult. That doesn't surprise me. Very often with horses, especially the ones who've been jumping horses and things, they don't have good trots because no one ever trotted them. So if you can canter over the back as nice and as controlled as this is, you're on the right track, and this will lead to something very, very good. As long as you can get that, you're golden, so to speak. And look how happy this horse. I mean, and even go back and compare this to the canter in that first part of the video there, and we saw you in the dressage show, and how the canter was almost crippled by how much rein contact and how high the head was. Now this horse has a nice regular canter, and it's over its back, so that's good enough right there. And once again, if that's what it takes to get the horse, I have one in my barn right now. Same, it was an old school horse, and until you canter it a little bit, just that way, that it just warms up better that way than any other way. So they're all a little different. But once again, our guiding principle is whether the horse is over the back. If you came out here and your canter looked like it did in that show ring with the horse very resistive, I would say it's not any good at all. But what you're doing here will lead to wonderful things, and that's well enough over the horse's back that will help him develop. So really great work here. And once again, she's working in a nice grass field. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. People, especially where I am here in California, I think all over America, so many dressage people have gotten to the point where, oh, we can't take our horses out of a ring. We've got to have this $1 million footing all the time to ride on. Well, they're having to do that because their horses are so badly trained. Once again, I trained hundreds of horses, if not thousands, in grass fields. My first job training a big-time barn in Unionville, Pennsylvania, training fox hunters, they didn't believe in having rings. So I had to start all the steeplechase horses, everything. I trained all the race horses there, and as well as train them for fox hunting when they came back. We just worked in a big field of grass, just like this, just like we go out and canter on. So nothing wrong with that at all. If your horse is over his back, you'll be able to ride. And the only problem with footing is when it's inconsistent. You can ride on hard footing, you can ride on soft footing, you can ride on grass, as long as there's just not a bunch of holes in it that you're falling into all the time. But just know that, once again, one of the points of having the horse over its back is that if you do hit a little hole, the horse isn't going to plunge into it because it's balanced on all four legs. And once again, whether the horse is on his forehand or not, remembering once again, has nothing to do with the position of the head and neck. In fact, it has more to do with the fact of the horse getting off his forehand. It has more to do with the horse stretching his head and neck down than anything else. But as you see, like the way you were riding this horse before, I'm sure somebody told you to ride the horse like this, as I see hundreds of trainers every day and horses at horse shows going in just that way. But look how nice this trot is, and once again, this trot is good enough over its back, and if you find that the trot is better by cantering first, there's no problem with that. They're all a little bit different, but that guiding principle remains the same throughout. There, getting it to a really good place right there. It's really stretching out. That's fantastic. And it was great today because someone wrote to me and said that they had watched Lisette's rides on Timo and used that as an example to show her friends so they could tell her when she was riding a horse whether it was right or not. And by studying those, how much deeper she was able to get the horse, and realized by videotaping herself that she wasn't getting all the way there. So once again, all of you are great examples for every one of you else, so to speak. So that's what we want to do. And training horses is not a difficult thing. This is the hardest thing to learn. If you can learn to get horses over their back and how to develop them, you can develop them for anything you want. It does not take any Herculean feats of strength or or anything of the sort in order to train a horse. It's just being able to follow those principles and stick with them. It's horse trainers today who have made horses so difficult, that this is where we end up here in California. We see so many people sidelined by trainers. They buy a horse. 2 weeks later, they can't ride it. The trainer tells them it's too much horse for them, even though they picked it out for them. And now they're riding it and showing it. So don't let yourself be sidelined by a trainer. If you can walk, trot, and canter any horse as well as Lisette here can do, you can train a horse yourself once you understand these basic principles and you are able to establish that stretch over the top line. Now we could see that last little bit of the trot there, how that became a little more difficult for the horse and that you're doing just the right thing was coming back to the walk. So I would agree with the way you went about doing this, by doing the canter work first with this horse, because the horse does canter better over its back than it walks, so that's perfectly okay. Come back to the trot as the last thing you do. Once again, as Nuno Oliveira used to always say when asked, well, how do you do this and that? It all depends. It all depends on the horse. They're all a little bit different. But the principles that guide us remain the same throughout all of them. So we know that we have to get the horse over the back or it's not going to have any value, and we know we need to get that to happen pretty quickly. Just like I like how you didn't go on doing a lot of trot work there, because the trot work wasn't as good as and wasn't as stretching down as this. But what you'll find in a short period of time, it will be, and you're going to see that belly on the horse. I really look forward to seeing this horse in another month or so after you've been doing this. I mean, even here in the walk, I'm already seeing the horse beginning to draw its abdominal wall up, and that's what you want to see. That tells me the whole back is beginning to lift. And this horse at 22 years old is going to be great, because this horse should have lots and lots of years left in it. If you train it like this, there's no reason why this horse can't go on for many, many, many years. The sad thing is that, we developed these great wormers. Horses basically used to die of old age mostly from worms, because you just couldn't get all the worms out of them, and they eventually built up and built up. But now that we have wormers that pretty much rid the horse of anything, we're seeing lots of horses live to be very, very old horses because of that. And how sad that, if they're already lame at 7 or 8 and you're going to sit and look at it and you're, for another 25 years out in a pen someplace, because it's been ruined. And once again, once you ruin those joints, they're ruined for good. So fortunately, this horse looks like that did not happen to it. So you should have lots of years left on here once you're able to just correct those problems in the back, which you're well on your way to doing. So another really great ride by Lisette. And once again, I always suggest that, all you people get to know each other, get to know each other on Facebook. I know Lisette here also was helped out by another of the students over there, got together on Facebook. So really, if you guys, that's the best thing that can happen. This is Will Faerber from Art to Ride. Look forward to seeing you soon.